10 years together, I got a text, "I never loved you." I never thought I'd be the person whose world would shatter with a single text message. For 10 years, I had built my life around Ethan. 10 years of love, of laughter, of whispered dreams in the dark. We had met in college, one of those whirlwind romances that felt like fate had written us into the same story. He was my person, my safe place, my future. We had it all, or at least I thought we did. Mornings started with coffee and soft kisses before work. Evenings ended with our legs tangled on the couch, the glow of the TV flickering against the walls, his heartbeat steady against my ear. We had our inside jokes, our traditions. Friday night takeout, Sunday morning pancakes, the way he always twirled my hair between his fingers when he was thinking. I still remember our trip to Italy 2 years ago. He had surprised me with it just because he knew I had always dreamed of seeing Rome. We spent hours wandering the streets, eating gelato, making promises of a future filled with more adventures. Marriage was the obvious next step. We had talked about it 100 times. We weren't in a rush, but it was always there, waiting in the background like a song on repeat. He wanted a small wedding. I wanted something bigger. He wanted 2 kids. I thought maybe 3. But we always agreed on one thing, forever. That's why, when my phone buzzed that night, I didn't expect my world to split in two. I was in the kitchen, humming to myself as I poured a glass of wine. Ethan was supposed to be home soon. He had been working late a lot lately, but I didn't think much of it. He was busy. He was stressed. That's what I told myself. Then my phone lit up. A single message. A single sentence that erased an entire decade of love. "I never loved you." I read it once, then twice. My fingers felt numb as I gripped the edge of the counter. My heart slammed against my ribs. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. I called him immediately, no answer. I called again, voicemail. Panic twisted in my chest. Was he hurt? Was something wrong? Or worse? Was he serious? The wine glass slipped from my hand, shattering against the tiled floor, and with it, the illusion of the perfect life I thought we had. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, the words burning into my mind like a scar I'd never be able to erase. "I never loved you." 4 words that reduced 10 years to nothing. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, a deafening drumbeat of disbelief. This had to be a mistake. Ethan would never say something like this, not after everything we'd built together. I tried to convince myself it was a joke, a sick, twisted joke. Maybe someone had stolen his phone. Maybe he had meant to send it to someone else. Maybe I was dreaming and I'd wake up any second now. But I wasn't dreaming. The phone nearly slipped from my grasp as I pressed his name, my thumb moving on autopilot. The call rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. I called again, nothing. A cold weight settled in my stomach. This wasn't real, it couldn't be. I left a voicemail, my voice shaking. "Ethan." "What? What is this? Call me back, please." Then I sent a text. "Ethan, please tell me this is a mistake. Please, call me." 3 dots appeared on the screen. My breath caught in my throat. He was typing. Then they vanished. I stared at the screen, willing them to come back, willing him to say something, anything. But nothing happened. A sudden wave of nausea rolled through me. My legs felt weak, so I stumbled toward the couch, collapsing onto the cushions. My fingers were still gripping my phone like a lifeline, but no calls came, no texts. I glanced at the door, expecting him to walk through any second, laughing, telling me it was all some kind of misunderstanding. But the apartment was silent except for the dull ringing in my ears. I forced myself to stand. My movements felt slow, detached, like I was moving through water. I grabbed my coat, my keys. I needed to find him. He was at work. He had to be. He hadn't mentioned any plans. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe. I barely noticed my own reflection in the hallway mirror as I rushed out the door, my mind racing with questions that had no answers. But one thing was clear. Something was very, very wrong. The drive to Ethan's office was a blur. My hands were cold, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe he was in trouble. Maybe someone was forcing him to send that message. Maybe this wasn't real. But deep down, a darker thought lurked. What if it was true? When I arrived, the receptionist gave me a hesitant look. "Ethan left early today," she said, glancing at the clock. "A few hours ago, actually." I stood there, frozen. "Did he say where he was going?" She shook her head. "No, he just left." Something in her tone made my stomach twist. I mumbled a thank you and walked back to my car, my feet feeling heavy. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping my phone. He was ignoring me. Completely, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. I called again, straight to voicemail. I texted again, no response. By the time I got home, panic had turned into something worse, an aching, gnawing doubt that settled in my bones. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, willing it to light up with an explanation. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I scrolled through old photos, old messages, through 10 years of love, of laughter, of everything we'd built together. I was searching for something, an answer, a clue, a sign that I had somehow missed. At first, all I saw were the good times. Our first vacation together, arms wrapped around each other on a sunlit beach. His goofy selfies, the ones I always teased him about. The messages filled with "I love yous and I can't wait to see yous." But the deeper I went, the more cracks I started to see. Messages left on read for hours, sometimes days. Excuses, meetings running late, last-minute work trips. Moments when he had seemed distant, distracted. And then I saw it. A picture from a year ago, one I barely remembered taking. We were at a party, smiling at the camera, but something about it felt off. It was his eyes. His smile was there, but his eyes were empty. Had I missed it? Had he been pretending all along? I called my best friend, Mia. When she picked up, I barely managed to get the words out. "Ethan just texted me. He said he never loved me." There was a beat of silence, then disbelief. "What? That doesn't make sense. You two have been together forever." "I don't understand either," I whispered, my throat tight. "Was it all a lie?" Mia hesitated. "Maybe he's having some kind of breakdown. Maybe this isn't what it seems." I wanted to believe her, but as I stared at the screen, at the years of messages and photos, doubt curled around my chest like a vice. Had I spent 10 years loving a lie? I sat in the dim glow of my living room, my phone clutched in my hands like a lifeline. The silence around me felt heavier than ever. The memories I had spent years cherishing now felt like ghosts haunting my mind, replaying over and over with a new, sinister meaning. Had I been blind? Had I ignored the signs that were right in front of me? The first time Ethan canceled our anniversary dinner, I had laughed it off. "Work emergency," he had texted. "I'll make it up to you, I promise." And he had. A few days later, he brought me flowers, kissed me deeply, and took me to an expensive restaurant. Back then, I thought it was sweet, thought it showed how much he cared. But now I wondered, had that been guilt? Then there was the way he had slowly stopped making plans for the future. A few years ago, we would talk for hours about the house we wanted, the places we'd travel to, the family we might start someday. But in the past year, he had started changing the subject, laughing it off. "Let's not plan too far ahead, babe. We have time." Was he already slipping away back then? A sick feeling settled in my stomach as I remembered a night just a few months ago. We had gone to a party, one of those fancy corporate events for his company. I had been excited, proud even, to be there with him. But looking back now, I saw the way his fingers had twitched when I reached for his hand. The way he had introduced me to his colleagues with a strained smile, as if my presence was an obligation rather than something he wanted. And then there were the late nights, the unexplained absences, the sudden need for space. At the time, I had told myself it was just stress, just work. But now, as I pieced it all together, I saw the truth for what it was. Ethan had been slipping away from me for a long time, maybe even for years. And I had been too in love, too trusting, too blind to see it. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Because underneath the heartbreak, something else was growing inside me. Anger. I had given this man 10 years of my life, 10 years of loyalty, love, and devotion. And now, with nothing but a single text message, he had erased it all as if it meant nothing. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was ready for the truth. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Ethan's words flashed in my mind. I never loved you. Over and over, like a cruel, endless echo. By morning, exhaustion had turned into determination. I needed answers. I tried calling him again, straight to voicemail, again and again. Then I texted, Ethan, please, just tell me why. No response. I refused to be ignored. If he wouldn't answer me, maybe someone else would. I started with his best friend, Chris. He had been Ethan's closest confidant for years, the guy he told everything to. If anyone knew what was going on, it was him. The phone rang twice before he picked up. Hey, he said hesitantly, like he already knew why I was calling. Chris, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Where's Ethan? A long pause. Too long. I don't know, he finally muttered. I haven't talked to him in a few days. Lies. I knew that tone. I had heard it before, when Ethan had covered for Chris after one of his failed relationships. They were like brothers. There was no way Chris didn't know something. You're lying, I said, gripping my phone tighter. Tell me the truth, Chris. Did he say something to you? Did he... My voice cracked. Was there someone else? Another silence, then finally a sigh. Look, it's not my place. My stomach twisted. There was something big. Hanging up on Chris, I started reaching out to more people, friends, mutual acquaintances, anyone who might know something. That's when I got a message from her. Emma. She was a woman I had barely thought about in years, a former colleague of Ethan's. Pretty, confident, always a little too friendly with him. Back then, he had insisted they were just friends. I had believed him. Her message was short but devastating. I think we should talk. I felt sick. My fingers hovered over the screen, hesitating for a long moment before I typed, About what? The reply came almost instantly. Ethan, and the things he never told you. My hands shook as I stared at the message, a cold dread settling over me. The truth was coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. My hands were ice cold as I stared at the message from Emma. Ethan, and the things he never told you. Every instinct in my body screamed at me not to answer, that whatever truth she was about to tell me would be something I couldn't take back. But I had already come too far. I needed to know. So I replied, Tell me. The three dots appeared, paused, disappeared. Then finally, a response. Not over text. Meet me at the Clover Cafe, 1 hour. The drive to the cafe felt surreal. The city blurred past me, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. 1,000 possibilities ran through my mind. Had Ethan been seeing her all along? Had he been using me for something? Every scenario was worse than the last. I spotted Emma the second I walked in. She sat at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup, her expression unreadable. When she saw me, she gave a small, hesitant nod. I didn't bother with small talk. Tell me. Emma exhaled and looked me straight in the eyes. Ethan and I... She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. We were together. For years. I felt my stomach drop. Liar, I whispered. We were together for 10 years. Emma nodded. I know, and for 8 of them. So were we. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, my breath coming in short gasps. It started when we worked together, she continued, her voice flat. At first it was just harmless flirting, or at least that's what I told myself, but it never stopped. He told me he loved me, that he couldn't leave you, not yet, but that he would, eventually. Rage boiled inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. And you believed him? Emma laughed bitterly. I was stupid. He told me you were fragile, that he didn't want to hurt you, but he was never going to leave you, because you were safe. She looked me in the eye. He used you. The words hit harder than I expected. Used me. A decade of my life, my love, my trust, all of it had been nothing more than a safety net for him. And then Emma dropped the final bombshell. He's seeing someone else now. Everything inside me went still. What? Emma nodded, looking almost apologetic. That's why he cut you off. He's moved on, just like that. My blood ran cold. Ethan hadn't just betrayed me, he had erased me. And suddenly I knew I wouldn't let him get away with it. I sat in my car outside the cafe, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breath was shallow, my vision blurred with rage and heartbreak. 8 years. 8 years he had been with her while he had been with me. And now there was someone else. Another woman falling for his lies, just like I had. I wanted to scream. I wanted to destroy him. My phone was still in my lap, Emma's last words echoing in my mind. He's moved on, just like that. I could feel the fire rising in my chest, the need to do something, to make him hurt the way he had hurt me. Exposing him seemed like the obvious answer. I could ruin his reputation, tell his colleagues, his family, his friends. I could send every message, every detail, every dirty little secret to the world. Let them all see him for what he truly was. A liar, a cheater, a coward. I even imagined the satisfaction of watching his life burn. But another voice whispered in my head, a quieter one. Would that change anything? Revenge felt tempting, intoxicating even, but deep down I knew the truth. No amount of public humiliation would make up for what he had stolen from me. The years I had wasted, the love I had given so freely, the trust he had crushed. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. This was about me. I had spent a decade making him my world, believing in a future that had never existed. If I let my anger consume me now, I'd be giving him even more of my life. More time, more energy, more power. I refused. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to relax. I wasn't going to let him destroy me. Instead, I was going to walk away, not as the broken woman he had left behind, but as someone stronger, someone who refused to be defined by his betrayal. Would it be easy? Would it hurt? More than anything. But I knew now that the best revenge wasn't ruining his life. It was rebuilding mine. With one last glance at my phone, I deleted his number. Ethan was my past, and I was done living there. The first morning without him felt like waking up in a different world. The bed was colder, the apartment quieter. No sound of his footsteps, no scent of his cologne lingering in the air. But for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't waiting for him. I was reclaiming myself. At first, everything felt heavy, getting out of bed, making coffee, even existing. But I forced myself to move, to breathe, to try. I leaned on my friends, something I had forgotten how to do. Mia dragged me out of the house, made me laugh when all I wanted to do was cry. My family reminded me that I had always been strong, even when I couldn't see it myself. And therapy. Therapy became my sanctuary. It was there that I finally said the words out loud. He never loved me. It felt like admitting a death, but my therapist, a woman with kind eyes and an unshakable presence, simply asked, "Does that mean you weren't worthy of love?" I didn't have an answer right away, but I knew that somewhere inside me, past the grief, past the anger, there was something still alive. Me. I had spent so many years orbiting around Ethan that I had forgotten who I was outside of him. So I started over. I pulled out old sketchbooks from the closet, the ones I had abandoned when life became too busy. The pencil felt strange in my hand at first, but soon the lines began to flow, forming shapes, emotions, pieces of myself I had neglected. I signed up for dance classes. I took myself out to dinner, to the movies, to bookstores where I could get lost in pages without worrying about anyone else's schedule. I was learning to be alone, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of it. Then one evening, just as I was starting to believe I had left him behind, my phone lit up with a name I never expected to see again. Ethan. A simple message. Can we talk? My heart didn't race the way it once would have. Instead, a cold, calm clarity settled over me. Did he regret it? Did he miss me? Or was this just another manipulation, another attempt to keep me tethered to him? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. For the first time in a long time, I realized something. I didn't owe him anything. Not a response, not closure, not me. So I did the only thing that made sense. I deleted the message, and this time I smiled. I never planned on seeing Ethan again. I had spent months rebuilding myself, stitching together the broken parts of who I used to be. The anger had dulled, the sadness had become manageable, and for the first time in years, I was living for myself. But life has a cruel sense of irony, because just when I thought I had finally escaped his shadow, fate threw him right in front of me. It happened in the most ordinary way. I was leaving a bookstore, arms full of novels I had promised myself I'd read, when I heard my name. At first, I thought I had imagined it, but then there it was again. Familiar, hesitant. I turned, and there he was, standing just a few feet away. Ethan. He looked almost the same, but something in his eyes had shifted. He wasn't the confident, charming man I had spent a decade loving. He looked unsettled, maybe even regretful. "I was hoping I'd run into you," he admitted, shoving his hands into his pockets, his voice lower than I remembered. I could have walked away, I should have, but curiosity, or maybe the part of me that still wanted answers, kept my feet rooted to the ground. "Why?" He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Because I owe you an explanation." I didn't say anything, I just waited. He took that as permission to continue. "I handled everything wrong, I know that. I should have ended things differently. I should have talked to you instead of—" He hesitated, as if saying it out loud would make it worse. "Instead of sending that text." The words felt distant now, like an old wound that had already started to heal. "Why did you do it?" He looked away for a moment, then back at me, and for the first time, I saw the truth in his eyes. "Because I was a coward." He shook his head, frustration laced in his tone. "I was unhappy, but I didn't know how to leave. I thought if I made you hate me, it would be easier." Something inside me cracked, not from pain, but from clarity. He hadn't done it because I wasn't enough. He had done it because he wasn't enough. Not for me, not for anyone. I nodded, more to myself than to him. "I spent so long thinking I did something wrong," I admitted, "that I missed something, that I wasn't good enough." His expression tightened. "You were good enough. You were more than enough. I was the one who—" I held up a hand, stopping him. I didn't need his guilt. I didn't need his apologies. I didn't need him. "I'm not here for closure, Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "I already found it on my own." For the first time, I saw it hit him, really hit him, that I was no longer the woman he had left behind, that I didn't need his answers anymore. I gave him a small, knowing smile before turning away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I wasn't leaving with pain or anger. I was leaving with freedom, and that was more satisfying than any revenge could ever be. A year had passed since I last saw Ethan, and in that time, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The pain that once consumed me had softened into something else. Wisdom, maybe. Or just the quiet acceptance that some things are meant to break so better things can be built. I was no longer the woman who had clung to a relationship that was already gone. I had become someone stronger, someone who no longer defined herself by the love of another, but by the love she had found within herself. I had moved to a new apartment, smaller but filled with light. It was mine in every way, the walls lined with bookshelves, canvases covered in unfinished paintings, plants I actually managed to keep alive. Every inch of the space reflected the person I was becoming. I had thrown myself into my art, something I had abandoned for years while wrapped up in Ethan's world. What started as a way to cope had turned into something more. My work was being noticed. People were buying my pieces, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing something for me. One evening, I found myself sitting on my balcony, watching the city hum beneath me. A warm breeze drifted through the air, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. No more anger, no more resentment. Just the quiet understanding that everything had happened exactly as it was supposed to. My phone buzzed beside me. A message from someone new, someone kind, someone who had been patient as I learned to trust again. I smiled, but not because I needed love to feel whole. I had already learned that I was enough on my own, but I had also learned that opening your heart again doesn't mean forgetting the past. It just means knowing you can survive whatever comes next. I thought back to everything I had been through: the betrayal, the heartbreak, the nights spent wondering if I would ever feel normal again. And yet, here I was, whole, happy. Mister. I took a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs, and whispered the words I had come to understand more than ever. Sometimes you have to walk through hell to find yourself. And I had, and I was never going back.